Shalom, a greeting of peace to all of you, far and near, from my home in New York City to your homes, to your hearts. Shalom in Hebrew means peace. It also means well-being and wholeness when it all feels together. It's a deep honor for me to be with you on this day, focusing on well-being, on wholeness. I'm deeply honored and humbled to be with a JFNA family as you are all taking the time to focus on your own well-being so that you can continue doing the work of care for so many worldwide. Thank you for inviting me to focus on this sacred human priority. This was known by our ancients, and I want to share with you a few words from Isaiah, the prophet, who thousands of years ago reminded us, Shalom, Shalom, larachok v'lakarov, let there be peace and well-being to those far and those near. So says the sacred source, so that there will be healing. With this prophetic, poetic intention, I want us to spend a few moments today really focusing on the ways of healing that we've inherited from our ancestors, the ways of healing that have been inspired by Jewish heritage for the benefit of all. As we have all this past year been struggling in so many ways to survive and to thrive, to create healing and well-being for ourselves, for each other, for this world. How can we do an even better job and be better at being? So I want to talk to you today about the teaching of the leper. It's a big word, a triggering word. When I use the word leper, what comes to mind is trauma and stigma, taboos and recoiling. The leper in our tradition is the holder of fear and illness, physical and metaphysical. And yet, the leper is an invitation for us not just to shy away from, but to lean in to this work of personal and collective healing. So we can be the ones who are not only healed, but also are healers for each other. Why the leper? Why on this day when we're focusing on healing in the context of what's going on in the world? Why this story of the leper? In the Jewish tradition, each year we recycle and reread the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. Every Saturday in a synagogue near you, now often online, we open the scrolls and retell the stories of our ancestors. Every Saturday, another installment. And this coming Saturday, there will be the retelling from the chapters in Leviticus, the 3rd book of the Torah, that have to do with the procedures of the leper. As a medical condition, way back in the days of the Bible, this was a threat, as in so many ways other threats are known to us today. The leper represents somebody who has a skin disease. This can also be an illness, a disease that occurs in the body, in the home, in society. And so the Bible has these very specific recipes for how to deal and how to heal and how to address the needs of the individual and the society in the case of the leper. Now, leprosy, as it shows up in the Torah, in the Bible, might be a very specific infectious illness, a disease that we may or may not exactly know about today. What medical reality shows us about what this condition may have been is different. Thanks to modern medicine in the 20th century, whatever leprosy was is increasingly becoming an illness of the past. But as a metaphor, what leper is to us, within us, and how we can do better in healing, addressing within and beyond is what I want to talk about. The leper as the metaphor, and the leper as the teaching that today we might be listening to. The leper is somebody who, because of illness that they had probably nothing to do with, finds themselves quarantined and socially isolated. There are safety measures, and there are inspections, and there are procedures for how one safely comes back to normal. Sounds familiar? Who would have thought that in 2021, in our reality, so many of us still struggling with sheltering in place, with vaccinations and hopes, with losses and fears, the story of the leper will become in some way perhaps a metaphor for what went wrong, but also for what can be helped and can go right. We can learn something from these ancient stories for our modern reality of how we can help ourselves and others. And so I want to invite us into this world, into these stories, and begin with the words in the book of Leviticus Chapter 14, the beginning of the story, these laws, the teaching of the leper. Zot tihiyeh Torat HaMetzorah. This shall be the Torah, the teaching of the leper. On the day of cleansing, the leper shall be brought to the priest, the Kohen. So imagine the situation. An individual has been afflicted with this disease. This person has been in quarantine for at least a week or possibly more. And then this person is brought to the authorities, the Kohen, the priest, the medical, spiritual authority, who's there to inspect. Is this person ready to re-enter society? There's a lot of responsibility on this Kohen, the priest, the leadership that is there to assess and to help alleviate, if possible, the illness and the isolation. They don't meet where the leper is, they don't meet where the priest is. They meet in the middle, on the threshold of life and death, a safe zone. And the leper stands in front of the priest, patient and doctor, defendant and judge, congregant and rabbi or priest. There's an authority here. There's an exchange of energy, and it can go many ways. A single word, a look, a gesture can determine the fate of this person and perhaps of the entire society if it isn't careful enough. How does one go out of one's way as the provider, as the healer, as the priest in the story, to be as compassionate and present, full of empathy and careful attention to the needs of the person standing in front of them, eye to eye, face to face, leper and priest? When do you say yes and when do you say no, and how? If you think about the story for just a moment, I want you to think about what is the leper as a metaphor in our lives today. What has it been for you in your life? Who is that person who is shunned and feared? That isn't always about a physical disease or a mental situation. Lepers are symbolic for so much more that we're afraid of. Maybe we understand now more than ever. There's an excellent book that came out in 2016 about spiritual care, especially for veterans coming back from war with PTSD. The book is called Maps and Meaning, Levitical Models for Contemporary Care, written by Nancy H. Weiner and Joe Hirschman. And they write, modern and postmodern societies persist in a long-held tradition of making the term leper synonymous with non-human. The leper is non-human, the other. From all the work we all do, we know what that means. Maybe it's somebody who's homeless, maybe somebody who's dealing with physical or mental illness, maybe it is the mourner, maybe it is the assaulted or the assailant. Whatever the leper is, whoever the leper is in our lives, within ourselves, the question is, how do we do better at healing and treating? The French philosopher Michel Foucault once wrote, "We have created a narrative of assigning the unreasonable to the regions of excluded non-human whose symbolic inhabitant is the leper." The unreasonable. And we are asked to bring reason and love into these encounters. So how do we do this? How do we, as providers of care, reach out to each other when this past year we all know what it's like to be the leper, to be in quarantine, to be afraid of our own breath, to be shunned? How do we heal, and how do we heal each other? For that we go back to the author of the Torah, Moses, the man who is the liberator of our people, of all people, in so many traditions, who begins his career as a shepherd. And in Exodus chapter 4, before he becomes the big liberator, before he confronts the Pharaoh, he is called by the divine to step up. And he says, who am I? I can't do this. I can't heal. I can't liberate. And the divine says to him, take your hand and put it inside your bosom, your shirt, your heart. The hand comes out white, as though he was a leper. He's horrified. But then he puts his hand back then and comes out clear, pure, healed. Moses is being taught something at that moment. Something about empathy. Something about being a healer. They won't believe me, he says. I can't do this, he says. And the divine says to him, you have to understand what it's like to be the other in order to liberate the other. This is the first time leprosy, tzara'at, this disease shows up in the Torah. The first leper is our greatest leader. What do we learn from that? Why did Moses deserve this? Because that's how he learned. That's how he and we are taught how to be there for the possibility of hope and repair and redemption. The leprosy was his sign to believe in the possibility of change and transformation in himself and in the people. To be the healer, he first had to be the leper, learning firsthand with his hand the horror of being the other, the slave, the vulnerable, the terrified, the shunned. Only then can he become the leader who will take his people home. When it was time for the Exodus, Moses insisted that everybody leaves, women and men, old and young, and let's believe that no leper was left behind. That's what liberation, that's what healing looks like. And that's what the Torah of the leper teaches us today. Empathy, the ability to be there with the other. The ability to listen, to look as the priest looks into the healer's eyes, as we are called upon to stand and watch and listen and be here with and for each other. The leper becomes the healer. The Kohen, the priest who stands there, welcoming, hopefully, the leper back into community, can do so because he, she, they, us understand what it's like to be in this world with all of its complexity. Susan Sontag wrote in her beautiful essay, Illness as Metaphor, everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we all prefer to use the good passport, sooner or later each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place. This past year, as we're entering now the second year of COVID-19, we all know what it's like to use both passports. Healers and lepers. That's us. Lepers and leaders, eye to eye, we are called to stand together in the healings of our lives. And it starts with caretaking of ourselves, what we're doing today, so we can be here for others. So let us end with the words with which we began, the words of Isaiah. Shalom, shalom, larachok v'lakarov. Let there be peace and well-being to those of us far and to those of us near, within ourselves and beyond ourselves, so that there will be the sacred healing we're all yearning for. Thank you. May we meet in peace.